Hello, my name is Michaela O'Connor Abrams, founder of Mocha Plus. Welcome to our Collective Conscience series. We created this series for you to bring together great minds from around the world on myriad topics that we hope will expand your mind, will challenge your current beliefs, and give you an opportunity to be inspired with every video. Enjoy.
Welcome back and welcome to Collective Conscience. Michaela and I created Collective Conscience because we wanted to bring together interesting people from all kinds of backgrounds, perspectives, industries, to give their takes on what they see happening in their industries, in their lives, and what that can mean for us all. And every week we try and bring somebody new, and we've been working with the themes and just having everybody from a farmer to Bruce Mau, who's joining us tonight. So we have all kinds of wonderful people, and we hope you'll keep coming back on Monday evening. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Michaela and Bruce.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Well, this is really a wonderful opportunity yet again to welcome my friend Bruce Mau to Collective Conscience Salon. He joined us on May 11th for the first part of a three-part series to talk about the massive change principles, which he has been working on for about a decade. And while there are no shortage of books authored by Bruce, this one, which is, I'm told, the first to be purchased in North America. So it has even a more special place in my heart than it already did, knowing what was coming. He is sharing with us principles from the book as we discuss the times in which we are living. So on May 11th, a great deal about it was our environment and adapting to that environment, ways in which we think about our environment and how we adapt. And 2 short weeks later, we have the murder of a man on camera, seen by the world. And now we are most definitely in what is, we hope, the beginning of massive change as it regards civil rights and social justice that we can create for permanent change. So the principles that Bruce will talk about tonight will address how we can actually do that. If you are anything like I, it all feels incredibly challenging, incredibly sad, incredibly frustrating that I, at least, I don't know, of course, the age of all of you here in our community, but I was about 10 during civil rights, the first movement. And I just had a hard time getting my head around how this could be happening 50 plus years later, and what everyone, no matter your age, your gender, your political party, your religious affiliation or not, where you live in the world, we all have a responsibility. And so what Shelley and I hope to do is to make all that feels so significantly hard much easier. And there is no one on the planet, truly, that I know that can help us do this and come up with what are tangible, not arduous, not things that make us want to pull the covers over our head, kind of processes in design that will give us some guidance about what, in fact, we may do to help start this, hopefully, change in perpetuity. So without further ado, Bruce, welcome once again to Collective Conscience. It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Shelley. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to go through 2 of the principles today that I think are relevant to what is really going on right now. And you know, as Michaela said, I really started this work about 10 years ago. It seems ridiculous to me that it could take that long, but it did. And it really was a kind of process of unearthing the principles that are really central to the work that I've been doing now for a little over 30 years. So the book starts with this paragraph. Practically everything we do today needs to change. We're still doing most things as if we own nature and have unlimited resources. We work as if waste is not a problem. We treat nature like a pantry and a toilet. We think short-term, party like there's no tomorrow, and pass the check to future generations. We dump problems we can't solve into places we can't see, and many of our solutions create more problems than they correct. Things really do have to change now. And that was written before the pandemic hit. And frankly, when it did, I was quite nervous that the book was maybe too radically optimistic, and kind of went back to the publisher to say, look, I really need to rethink some of this. And they said, no, this is exactly what we need. So these are the 24 principles. And today I want to talk about we're not separate from or above nature, which is really a kind of Copernican shift in the way that we understand our place in the universe. And it's well established now, but not known by most people. It's not actually incorporated into the way that we live and work. And the second one is design the new normal, which is, I'm sure we're all tired of hearing that new normal concept or phrase, but actually understanding what designing a normal means and what that means for our practice, what we can do and what we should do and have to do in order to do that changes quite dramatically how we think about design, how we think about our work. So we'll start with the first principle: we're not separate from or above nature. The idea that we've been given dominion over nature really starts from our earliest history in the West, that is endlessly abundant. Those ideas are really dangerous relics of an age of ignorance. And today we understand that there's really only one thing on the planet, it's life. And life has an experiment going in form, and we're simply one of those forms. We're not a special case or somehow exempt from the rest of life. We are part of life. We depend on living ecological systems to sustain us, and there are real limits to nature's bounty. Our approach to everything we design and produce must be informed by this new consciousness. This really, as we learn more about this, we begin to see our way of living in a new way, and really, are really forced to reconsider, sort of how we do everything. So this is the passage from the King James Bible, Genesis. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, which is one of my favorite phrases. That is really sort of the source code of the kind of way that we approach nature for a couple of millennia. In fact, you can see this is a Ptolemaic vision of our place in the universe. And, for most of history, we imagined that we were the center of the universe. And that really was, it really kind of dominated our imagination. I mean, that was who we were. And we had that status, that special status. We were above the natural world. And along comes Copernicus, and he's trying to understand, why does Mars sometimes go backwards in the sky? So Mars seems to move across the sky and then at some point go back a little bit and then go forward again. And he was trying to understand how is that happening? How is that possible? If we're the center of the universe and things are moving around us, why are they going backwards? And he realizes that, mathematically, he discovers that, in fact, we're not the center of the universe, that Mars is actually going around the sun, and so are we. And he draws this famous diagram and tries to keep his head on so that he can live the rest of his life. And it takes him a really long time to actually reveal this insight, to really share this insight that, in fact, man is not the center of the universe. Fast forward, E.O. Wilson is perhaps the greatest life scientist working today. And we had the extraordinary pleasure of going into the jungle in Panama with E.O. Wilson. And he explained to us that rock is slow life and life is fast rock. That essentially all there is on the planet is rock and life. And life eventually, when it's over, gets pushed back down into rock. It gets, it gets pushed across the tectonic plates and back into the earth. And eventually it comes out again through volcanoes. And so you have this incredible cycle. And that rock is used by life that animates it with electricity and brings that matter to life. So it turns out that Joni Mitchell was right. You are stardust. You are the material that makes your body. Most of it was made in the core of stars. And that's what life is. And life has this extraordinary formal experiment happening where it is constantly iterating form. And we end up being one of those forms. And that's really what's happening on the planet. Now, we've been at this problem a long time, trying to understand, how do we fit into this system? And these are just a few of the landmarks along the way. Paul Hawken, Natural Capitalism and Blessed Unrest. Janine Benyus, Biomimicry, extraordinary. Like, she basically had the insight that there are several billion years of design intelligence in the natural world. What if we could make that accessible to designers? Gunter Pauli, The Blue Economy, really looking at how does nature produce wealth, and how could we turn that into 100 million jobs? McDonough and Baumgart, Cradle to Cradle, really looking at the way that we live as a continuous flow of matter and energy that never goes out of the cycle. And then Donella Meadows, her famous work on leverage points, how to design complex systems. And then finally, Massive Change, really thinking about designing life, that we're actually developing a life-based design practice and really trying to understand how that works. The real insight of Massive Change, really, that kind of changed my way of working and thinking, came out of this diagram. And I was trying to explain the difference that we were seeing. On the left, you have the kind of classical old way of thinking, which is that design is a subset of business, business is a subset of culture, and culture happens in a natural context. And what we see in the new world and what's happening today is that business, culture, and even nature are design projects. We're designing life. We're designing ecologies. And when I first talked about this, people thought, Bruce, you're a megalomaniac. You just want to control everything. But for me, it's not about control. It's really about responsibility. And where we fail to design, we design for failure. You see all over the world where we're not designing, we're destroying ecosystems. And at the same time, all over the world, we're working to recover the natural systems that we need. When I did Massive Change, I went to a high school. I did a presentation and I showed them this quotation by Arnold Toynbee, which really launched the whole project. The 20th century will be chiefly remembered as an era in which we dare to imagine the welfare of the entire human race as a practical objective. And I said, look, this is what I think is really going on. This is what designers are doing. It's an extraordinary moment that we're actually able to and thinking about the entire human race. And a young woman came to the microphone after my presentation and said, Mr. Mao, I think you're not thinking big enough. And she said, you should take out the entire human race and put in all of life. That's our project for the 21st century. And I was really blown away. I thought, you know, what kind of high school is this? But I was really knocked out by the realization that in fact, you know, we were working with a blind spot. She was absolutely right that the 21st century project is not the whole human race. It's really designing for all of life. And it's just a fundamentally different way of understanding our responsibility and the work that we do and the impact of the work that we do and the way that we live and all of the kind of pressure you're seeing on the streets right now in many ways goes back to this kind of basic challenge that we are not respecting all of life, that we're not designing for all of life. So that's the first principle. So you can see that, you know, if we really think about that, it really fundamentally challenges and questions our way of working, our way of doing business, our way of traveling. I mean, everything that we do has to really be rethought. The second principle is design the new normal. We long for safety in a world fraught with change and the dangers that represents. Stability is more pressing, and that I think couldn't be more true than it is today. Science shows that most decisions are not taken in the frontal cortex, so we're not actually governed by reason, even though we think we are. We think if we had the right information, we would make good decisions. But the science clearly shows that we are actually driven by a powerful need to conform. So we are from a very early age constantly watching and behaving as others behave. And that dominates our way of life. So we learn how to behave by watching others. When we design, we're changing how people live. Even the kind of most banal design is programming in some way our way of life. So designing new norms is really the objective of massive change. We're trying to think about how can we design the normal behavior, not a special case, but the real normal behavior. What we see is that pioneers and innovators often alienate the very people they hope to transform because they're so excited by what they're doing. So long as sustainability and equitable living are special, extraordinary, and heroic, we send the message that they're not normal, they're not for me. To create lasting change, reinforce stability and design the environment to inspire, stimulate, and reward change. Make smart, beautiful, intelligent the new simple, easy, normal, which is really counterintuitive for most designers. Most designers are in some ways dedicated to the special case. They want the awesome singular thing that only they could accomplish. And the harder it is, the more excited they are. All of that is counter to what we're trying to accomplish. This is one of my favorite images. It's considered by some to be the greatest meeting of the minds in history. In this one image, in this one meeting, one scientific meeting, you have Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Niels Bohr, Marie Curie. I mean, these are people who radically reconceived the universe. They changed our fundamental understanding of the universe. But you can see two very obvious things. One is that there's only a single woman in the group. Two, there's not a person of color. But three, they're almost all dressed identically. You know, they're all wearing white shirts, they're all wearing ties, they're all wearing jackets, they're all wearing trousers, they're all wearing shoes. Even Marie Curie fits right in. She's almost invisible. And so what you realize is just how powerful norms are. If these folks could reconceive the energetic forces of the universe, but not behave differently, you understand just how powerful norms are. What we discover in neuroscience is that most decisions are driven by emotion, not reason. The best case is buying a home. Almost no one buys a home off a spreadsheet. We visit the home, we fall in love with the home, and we spend more than we should. And so what you realize is that if we're going to succeed, if we're going to design the change that we need, we have to understand how people actually make decisions. Most work is done as if we make rational decisions. If I had the right information, I would make the right choice, when that's actually not how things happen. A great case study is Jay Winston and the Designated Driver. He was charged with reducing deaths among young people from drinking and driving. And what he did was he scanned the whole world looking for places where there was low deaths but high drinking. And he realized in Scandinavia, they had this concept of the designated driver. It was unacceptable for a young person to drink and drive. They said, you know, I would be beat up by my brother if I drank and drove. And so what he did was, instead of making a kind of classical campaign from the government, which was his client, he instead went to visit the television and cinema studios, and he asked them to slip it into their scripts, not to make a special, you know, it wasn't a kind of Oprah special on drinking. It was just use it in the normal language, let the kids from Friends talk about it, let the folks on Cheers talk about it as if it's the most normal thing. And in the space of just a couple of years, he dramatically reduced deaths from drinking and driving. When I moved to Chicago, I was fortunate to meet Mayor Daley and to really learn from, you know, one of the most extraordinary political animals I've ever encountered. And one of the things he talked about was reinforce stability to embrace change, which seems so counterintuitive. But he talked about how people need to think that things are actually improving in order to participate, in order to want to be part of it. And that means they need to see it. And so he did very inexpensive, very visible things that inspired people to join and be part of it. And he had an absolutely profound impact on transforming the city. One of the people that we studied is a man named Paul Dolan. And Paul Dolan developed this very brilliant concept called SNAP, for how to design for change. And it's salience, norms, affects, and primes. So salience is, I need to get your attention. You have to notice it. I need to somehow grab your attention. Norms is what we've just been talking about, how people mostly do what other people do. So you need to affect how people behave. Affects are emotions that we actually make decisions on an emotional scale, not intellectual scale. And primes are cues in the environment that nudge behavior in a certain direction. In other words, I can put things in the environment that help you do the right thing at just the right moment when you're actually in the process of doing something. If I can sort of understand that, I can actually slip my message into that process and change the way that you behave. So you can imagine that this is a methodology that can be applied to fundamental transformation, which we have, I mean, we've done some really amazing impact from that concept. And the concept of primes is really, you know, putting clues into the environment, designing the environment in a way that inspires the transformation. And Bucky Fuller said, you know, I made up my mind that I would never try to reform man. That's much too difficult. What I would do was to try to modify the environment in such a way as to get them moving in a preferred direction. And that's really what this principle is really all about. So I want to end with this quotation. Wangari Maathai was involved with the Green Belt movement in Africa and won the Nobel Prize. And that program, that movement, planted over 50 million trees. And I mean, I just love the way that she shapes this. In the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground, a time when we have to shed our fear and give hope to each other. That time is now. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've really been thinking and working on over the last several weeks is really this concept, the idea that one of the things I think in some ways the biggest impact of the pandemic is that it has given us a moment to stop and look at things. It's changed things that we thought could never be changed. It's stopped things that we thought could never be stopped. And I think we're all in some ways kind of taking a breath saying, wow, we could change things. You know, these things that we thought were permanent, that could never be transformed, are in fact open for transformation. In some cases, that force and that expression is coming up, you know, kind of bubbling up in the street. And in some cases, it's really being developed as you know, projects and you know, efforts that are coming out of business. I mean, think about what is happening, in brands and businesses over the last several weeks of really such profound and significant change in the way that we conduct ourselves. And I think, I mean, I really feel there's such an extraordinary moment of opportunity where things are open that won't last forever. And it's really our responsibility to do as much as humanly possible to live up to what Wangari Maathai is saying. So I'm going to stop that share and open it up to discussion.
I want to add to what you always so beautifully frame for us in putting what are seemingly insurmountable issues, a pandemic, a global, and certainly in this country, new crisis in humanity, even larger than what we would call social justice, but something that, as you've talked about these principles and what we must do, not to focus on all that makes us different, but focus on what we can do together, to be kind to each other, to help each other, to realize that we all, after all, right, are human. We all have our faults. The entire society is imperfect. As I was reading, once again, for those of you who had just joined my first book on MC24, and I truly am not getting paid to say this, but I've been doing a great deal of reading since the shelter-in-place order, and doubled down on that with the events of a few weeks ago. But honestly, very, very honestly, none of the reading that I'm doing, well, I am learning a great deal through each book and podcast and all the things that I'm endeavoring to access in order to have educated opinions. What I love, Bruce, is that every one of these 24 principles has a kernel in them that is applicable to talking about change and how we can go about it. So since I'm guessing, and I I can see most everybody, not everybody on my screen, I would love to know if anybody who can go and chat has also ordered your copy of the book. Because in the face of what seems so insurmountable, and Zoom itself, as many of you have pointed out and sent me notes on, can be you know, beleaguering in and of itself. In the grander scheme of things, that we face as a society, it's perhaps not in the top 10 worst things, but it has its own stressful issues. So one of the things in the principles, Bruce, that you talk about is that in order really to understand that change, we have to think of the worst first and design from. And I was saying earlier, well, we don't have to look too far right now, but seriously, so given this and the gravity of what we're dealing with, which it's an issue for people's mental health, etc., what are some basic ways in which you can tell our collective conscience community about constructive ways in which we can think about any of the principles that you've just spoken about in our first session or now, and what you explore in other principles in the book?
Well, you know, the principle that you're referring to is always search for the worst. And what I realize about design is that we see the world upside down. So to designers, good is not interesting. Bad is interesting. Terrible is awesome. So when things are very bad, it's the most compelling for design solutions. It actually calls us to our best. So the more challenging things are, the more the more exciting it is for designers to actually engage those problems. And so, you know, like I've had a studio for a long time. It seems like for the entire time, people in the studio have asked, why don't we work for Apple? And my response is, the last thing Apple needs is another designer. And they're already awesome, and you know they don't need me. Whereas many organizations, cities, countries, businesses are not awesome, and they're challenged. They have challenges of all sorts, and the more complex and deep those challenges are, the more value we can create by using design. And I think that, you know, what I've been doing for a long time is trying to liberate design from the tyranny of the eye. It's actually something that it comes from oh gosh, his name slips my mind right now. I'll remember it. But it really was something that it's Marcel Duchamp, that Marcel Duchamp did for art, you know, 70 or 80 years ago. And what he was trying to do was to say, look, we have to make art everything that we do. It shouldn't just be constrained to what we can see. And he really invented a whole new way of thinking about art, a whole new realm of art that has still mostly not happened in design. We're still really limited by the visual. And I think, you know, if you look at the principles in MC24, the kind of common denominator is to liberate ourselves from that constraint and say, you know what, social justice is a design problem. We can design the outcomes that we want, and there is no other way to get them. The only way out of here is by design. The only way that we're going to get, you know, equity and justice is by designing them. And it really, you know, you either accept accidental, random outcomes, or you design the outcomes that you want. And so that was really the origin of the principles, to say, you know, how do we reimagine the future of Mecca in a way that is better than the past? You know, how do we get to a better experience, a more dignified experience, a safer experience where people are not dying? we have to design it. And the same is true of our ecology and our social institutions and our government. And I think what you're seeing today is that, you know, our government is a design-free zone. We are, you know, there's almost no design being applied to the challenges that we face. It's desperately urgent that we do that. It's desperately urgent that we understand that we are not separate from or above nature. Because once you start to understand, oh, I am the natural world, and I'm going to design my world in a way that operates in perpetuity, you get to a completely different way of working. So yeah, I'm on the board of a new architecture school in Northern Canada, called the MacEwan School at Laurentian University, and we're developing a life-centered design methodology. And so one of the first projects that the students do is they go into the forest with an Indigenous elder, and they find a tree that is willing to give up its bark. And the elder explained that there's a moment in a tree's life just before it dies that if you take the bark off that tree, it just pops off in one almost like one piece. And so they go and they take the bark off a birch tree, and together they build a birch bark canoe in the way that it's been done for thousands of years. And the material that they use to seal the joints in the birch bark is made from bear fat, spruce gum, and ash from the fire. And they mix up this material and they seal their canoe once they built it. And that material will withstand 100-degree summers and -40 winters and not crack or leak. And when that canoe is finished, when it's no longer useful, all that material goes back to the earth. Right? There's nothing left. It is absorbed by the earth. And so we're teaching a generation of architects and designers to approach the world and their work in a totally different way. And one of the things that I was really blown away. I have to say that the experience there has really been extraordinary. Because the school is a tricultural project with French, English, and Indigenous people. And so I spent some time over the last couple of years with these Indigenous elders, and they explained that in their world, in their cosmology, people aren't at the center. Life is at the center. So they put life at the center, and then we go to life. And we join the other forms of life in kind of celebrating and respecting life. And you realize, I realized, like, I lived there for, when I was a kid, I never heard any of this stuff. And, I was totally like, just the kind of totally classical kind of exposure to education. And I realized, gosh, this is a totally different way of thinking, and it's 100% consistent with what I'm trying to do. And that's really what, that's really what this is all about.
Okay, so
sorry to monologue there.
I mean, as we've said, we could sit with this collective conscience community once a month and keep exploring these until we all feel a whole lot better that the tasks at hand, which are so monumental, are actually, if we use design to almost disassemble them, unpack it, and approach it differently, it isn't as hard or as bad as we think. But one of the things that Buckminster Fuller said, and you have this on the slide after, is that even after you come to agreement and decide on something, it does not change until the behavior changes, right? So that goes back to the same thing, that it isn't about designing a process, right? It is thinking differently. It's engendering a new way to motivate people to behave differently. And we don't legislate our way into better behavior.
Yeah.
If ever.
I mean, almost all, you know, I've done over the years, I've done, you know, quite a few social change programs with, you know, with organizations and government departments and, you know, smoking prevention and those kinds of things. Almost all of it was completely useless. Like, almost all of it was designed as if information was going to make the difference. Right. And I look back and I realized, gosh, we were just so stupid about it, that we just believed in rational behavior. And in fact, that's not how things change. I mean, we change when we, you know, it's not that we can't see benefits and move to the benefit, but we're not going to move to the benefit just by information alone, just by kind of data. We have to turn that data into emotion, and we have to use design to inspire people, and to inspire them in a way that makes them see possibilities that they didn't see before. And so for me, that principle of, you know, and the work that Paul Dolan framed out of really breaking it down into, you know, salience, norms, affects, and primes. I mean, you can apply that to any project. You know, if you want certain outcomes, I mean, think about how often you've heard somebody say, well, I told her, and she didn't do it. I told her twice. And you realize, like, what you say and what they hear are two different things. And for most communicators, we take responsibility for what we say. We don't take responsibility for what they hear. And as a designer, if you want, you know, if you see the world in crisis in the way that it is now, we have to take responsibility for what they hear, not what we say. And it really fundamentally changes the remit of design. You have responsibility. You don't only have responsibility for your project or your work or your deliverable. You have responsibility to the planet, to life. And it's a very different way of defining how we live and work. And it's super challenging. I mean, you know, we're all trying to make a living and trying to get by, and, you know, we're all struggling to have a life. And you know, these things really can, you know, fundamentally challenge our way of being.
Well, Bruce, I want to open it up. I know we have people in the queue, Shelley, who have questions. I want to leave that part to move to Q&A by saying that I one vote that we need a chief design officer as a permanent part of the cabinet for the President of the United States, so that perhaps we can begin there, right? Okay, now that I've just put that out there, and I, of course, would be nominating Bruce, let's go to the first question, Shelley.
All right, we have a question and a hello. I will unmute you. There you go.
Go ahead.
Hey, Bruce, it's Lenny. Great to see you.
Lenny, how are you? Great
Good.
to see you.
Great to hear from you. And if you run out of interest in design, you can always, I'm sure, make it as a Talmudic scholar. I love the beard. Hey, I was going to ask you about our experience where we did some great work together and we had some resistance or some less than sympathetic support from leadership. And we won't have to go into that, but in the bigger lens of today, that's definitely the situation where people are in the streets and trying to create change where people are obviously resistant. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, have you used your principles, or can you talk to the use of the principles to design an environment where change can be possible versus designing for the change itself?
Yes, sure. It's always that. It's always helping people to see the pathway, to see the possibility. You know, I did a huge project with Coca-Cola, and you know, we think of Coca-Cola as a company, but actually, when you work with Coca-Cola on a global level, you realize it's actually an alliance of thousands of companies. And there's very little control in the system. In other words, corporate Coca-Cola, the American headquarters of Coca-Cola, can't actually make the regions, all the different organizations all around the world do things. It's very limited what they can actually impose. What they can do is inspire them. So, you know, we did a sustainability platform for Coca-Cola to kind of move them to a better way of working, and you know, different material, different outcomes, different products, and all of that was ultimately about inspiration, to say, look, you know, you can be the company that is really helping to change things, and leading in certain ways, the kind of transformation that we need. And you know, I had to say that, you know, when I first got involved with them, a lot of my friends were like, Bruce, what are you doing? You know, like, don't work with them. And my response was, look, I know that, you know, like, it's going to take, you know, tens of billions of dollars and decades to make the changes that we're talking about. It's not going to happen, you know, probably not going to happen even in my lifetime in certain ways. But if they make changes and they continue to do it, thousands of businesses will follow suit, because most businesses don't have the wherewithal to actually figure that kind of stuff out. And in fact, you know, Coca-Cola is organized around continents. So it's, you know, North America, South America, you know, Europe, Asia, McDonald's, Africa. So McDonald's is a continent in the Coca-Cola landscape, and Coca-Cola is kind of like the big brother, with more science, more innovation, more leadership. And they sent me as a gift to McDonald's to talk about sustainability. And you know, I remember the first time I went there, they were like, you know, they were looking at their watches. It's like, you know, look, I got a lot of, you know, I got burgers I gotta get to. And they were like, who is this guy? Why is he here? Why is he talking? And we realized actually that it was about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years later, they called me to say, look, we're doing our sustainability program, and we're going to change, you know, everything that we do. And so you can, you know, you like it, you have to have faith in the long view, and really, you know, really know that a lot of people will learn and apply it, and they may not win in that job, but they're going to have other jobs, and they're going to do other things. And you just have to have the kind of long-term commitment to another way of working and living. So that's been my experience.
All right, we have another question. Yes. I guess I'm answering on behalf of everyone, but yes. We have a question from Vaman. Mom, I'm wondering about the intersection of systemic racism and our climate crisis. People of less means often live in environmentally unsafe and or polluted areas.
Yeah. Yeah, there are, I mean, we're going to see, I think, quite tragically, we're already seeing, and we're going to see a lot more of it, where the poorest people pay the highest price. And they literally pay the highest price for almost everything, but they're going to be paying the price with their lives, and they're already paying the price of their lives. We had a, you know, we have a great friend in a man named James Orbinski, James was the head of Doctors Without Borders, and received the Nobel Prize for his work there, and as on behalf of the organization. And we were talking to James today, and he was saying that he is committed to access and excellence. That he's committed to equity and excellence. That you have to you have to be working constantly for access. And the reality is that we've designed the system in America largely against poor people, not for them. We haven't designed a system that supports poor people. And as a consequence, only about 30% of Americans have college degrees. And when I worked with Michael Crow at ASU, our mandate was excellence and access. That this is a false trade-off when we think about supporting access and betting on everyone, as opposed to making a more and more rarefied, more expensive, more exclusive institution. And I'm part of Northwestern University. I'm a fellow there, and we celebrate when our rejection rate goes up. I mean, think about how perverse that is. We celebrate when we crush more dreams. Right? When we turn people away, people get bonuses. I mean, it's really insane. And so so this intersection of racism and climate, I think, is going to be it's going to get worse as the crisis gets worse. And the next 10 years are going to be really pressing, and we have to do everything we possibly can as quickly as possible. And the only way to do that is by design. The only way to get the results that we want is by designing the outcomes that we need.
Okay, and we have a question from Amy. She asks, how do we incorporate long-term design thinking into education? Any ideas on how we might instill the vocabulary and habits of mind earlier?
Well, I think that what's very exciting right now is that there's a revolution happening in the art and science of education. That we're moving away from a monoculture, and it's a dangerous moment, because when you unlock a monoculture, people are desperate for stability, so they are searching for another monoculture. Right? They're searching to replace one monoculture with another, when what we really need is a diverse ecology of learning. Right? We need to design all kinds of ways of learning. And if you think about learning as an experience, we have to redesign the experience of learning so that we have excellence and access. And that's, all the work that I did with Michael Crow at ASU was all about that. It was all about saying, look, if you take the problems we have, the challenges, and you organize the university around the problems are so vexing that they can never be easily solved. They're a kind of limitless font of inspiration. And if you provide the resources for people to take on those challenges, it's an unlimited source of resources and outcomes, where you can really have long-term impact, and you can start to see that people are joining things that are bigger than them. There are scientific projects going on that are decades in the process, and young people join those projects and contribute their time and effort and inspiration and brilliance during their time, and then they move on and other people join and take on the next kind of cycle. So there's actually a really exciting kind of exploration happening in the design of education. I just hope that we can keep it open and diverse and equitable, and not lock into another exclusive monoculture.
Bruce, I thank you so much, and that was our last question. But Shelley, I don't know how many other questions were in the queue at this point.
Just one.
Okay. I will just, we have always had the discipline of ending on time when we promise to start on time, but I want to honor one more question because of the subject matter and what we're dealing with, and talk a little bit about when Bruce comes back in number 3 in July. So do you want to unmute the person and have them ask?
She's written the question. Do you want to ask it, Amy? I can unmute you too. Other one. I'll do it. Okay. How do we incorporate long-term design thinking? Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. No, that's it. How do we incorporate long-term design thinking into education? Any ideas on how we might? No, we read that one.
We
sorry.
did.
That was a rerun.
Well, then
I was mistaken. We're done. We're
okay.
finished.
All right, great. I mean, not great, because the hour once again slipped away. And Bruce, thank you so, so much. We are coming back with you in July to have part 3, and we'll announce to everybody that date, but we want to keep this going. We had a number of people in the last month ask if they could still send you their manifestos that you asked them to each.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, please.
And I responded,
yeah,
yes,
I'd like to see them.
would. So for each of you, just so you know, and we will make sure you get the video of number 1, Bruce asked, and it's also covered in the book, to have you write your personal manifesto and send it to him. So for those of you who didn't get a chance to do it, or did not, were not a part of number 1, and thus didn't know about the offer and assignment, please do that. Write your personal manifesto, and we will send you the link to get it to Bruce. And thank you again, Bruce. It was great, and we could go on for a long time because we're all looking for hope and the avenues for change and the things that each of us can do to help bring about change, and not wait for somebody else, and certainly not the government to do that for us. It's really up to us. So thank you so, so much. And everybody, thank you very much for being with us. We are taking a little bit of a breather next, and I say a breather from all the deep thinking that we're doing. And once you get your copy, and Bruce, I've seen 3 people, by the way, just message me saying they've just ordered MC24. So thank you. But we're going back with Rochelle Boucher, our chef, with a live demo and a fabulous menu for the 4th of July. So thank you, everybody. Stay tuned. We'll send you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow morning. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bruce.